Welcome to the Video Software School on using Microsoft Windows. My name is Carol Hackstaff. In Lesson 2 of our 3-video series, we will cover the basics of the File Manager, what I consider to be one of the most critical components in using the Windows environment. In Lesson 2, we'll cover understanding what the File Manager is. We'll go in detail into all the parts of the File Manager screen. We'll launch applications from File Manager, search for specific files, launch and print files from File Manager, rename files, create directories that we can store our files in, move and copy files from one directory to another or one drive to another, and finally, delete files, a topic we need to be very careful with. Let's start by getting an overall understanding of the File Manager. The File Manager is the tool that we use to manage our permanent storage inside of our PC. So where's the permanent storage in your PC? You have a hard disk inside your PC. You might have more, but most of us have at least one hard disk. And you may have one or two floppy drives. A floppy drive we put little diskettes into for more portable storage if you want to take files from work to home or vice versa. Whether it's a floppy drive or a hard disk inside your PC, we refer to those drives with letters. If you have one floppy drive, we call it A drive. If you have two, you have an A and a B drive. If you have a hard disk inside your PC, we refer to that as C drive. No matter what the drive is, though, we'd like you to think of that drive or that disk as a file cabinet, just like a file cabinet you might have inside of your office or in your home. If you think of it as a file cabinet, just like in your office, in that file cabinet you have folders. Probably in your real file cabinet in the office you have hanging file folders, and those are probably set up for main topics. Inside of those hanging file folders you might have subfolders, little manila folders that you put inside for subtopics. Well, we have exactly the same concept on our PC. We'll use permanent storage or disks to store information in main level folders and subfolders inside. In fact, you can have subfolders inside of subfolders, but I recommend against getting too carried away with subfolders. It just buries things much deeper. Now, we'll have a structure on our hard drive that'll look something like this graphic. We have a concept from the DOS world, or our operating system DOS, called the directory tree. At the very top of the tree you'll have a folder. You won't actually have a file cabinet like this. You'll have a folder that'll say something by it like C:\\. That's what we call the root folder or the root directory. It's the root that all other folders stem from. Hanging off of that folder you'll probably have some main level folders, and inside some of those folders you'll have subfolders, and potentially inside some of those you may have further subfolders. Inside any of these folders you can have individual files. Some of these files you'll create, others will be placed or installed on your PC for you when you install software. Now, all of us will have certain folders in common. If you have an IBM compatible PC and you have DOS and Windows on that PC, you will have a DOS folder. When DOS was installed on your PC, it created a folder for itself, and inside that folder it put all of the program files that run the DOS application or the DOS software. You'll also have a Windows folder. Same exact story. When Windows was installed on your PC, it created a folder for itself, and in that folder put all the program files that run Windows. Now, outside of that, the folders you'll have on your PC might vary from the folders I have. I use Word for Windows, and so on my PC I have a Word for Windows folder. Exactly the same thing. When Word was installed, it created a folder and placed all of the program files that run Word inside of that folder. I also have an Excel folder. You might have a Works folder or a WordPerfect folder or a Lotus folder. It depends on what specific software applications you use. Now, outside of those folders, I highly recommend that you create at least one data folder. Take control of this storage space just like you would a file cabinet. In that storage space, you want data folders where you can organize the information or the files you create. So in this example, I created one data folder. Inside of that, I have a folder for any data I created in the spreadsheet Excel, and another folder for any data I've created in Word. Now underneath that Word folder, I created two subfolders. One for customers, so I can keep any specific customer correspondence in that folder, and another folder for any personal data or personal files I might have that I created in Word. When we actually get into File Manager, you'll see icons representing individual files. One of the icons will look something like a piece of paper with lines on it, and those are typically files that you've created. Generically, I just called this one letter.doc. One last thing we need to have an understanding of in the File Manager is something called a path statement. I'll be mentioning it frequently. A path statement is nothing other than a map to a specific file or a specific folder. It starts out with the actual drive or disk that your file is on. So in this case, my hard drive is C drive. Separate that from the folder with a backslash. It's in the data folder. Underneath that, it's in the Word folder. Under that, it's in the customers folder. And finally, the name of the file. This is how you would give someone else directions to this specific file on your drive or hard drive inside your PC. All of these terms and concepts we'll be covering throughout the lesson on File Manager. The File Manager is located in the main group in Program Manager. So to open the main group, I point to the main group icon and double click. Inside of the main group, I find the File Manager icon, point to that and double click. And we're now looking at the File Manager screen itself. While looking at the File Manager screen, it's helpful to know all the parts of the screen. For those of you who took Lesson 1, some of this will be a review, but there'll be plenty of new information as well. To start with, in the upper left-hand corner, there's a box there that has a little item that looks like a hyphen or a dash. We call that the control box. Most common use for that is to point to it and double-click, which closes this window. If I click one time, it opens up the control menu, which gives me some basic controls over this window. Another way I can close out of this window is to click here on the close command. If I want to switch to another open application right now, I can click on the switch to command. For right now, I'll simply turn this menu off. To do that, I click on the control box a second time, and that turns the menu off. Across the top of the File Manager screen, we have the title bar. And over to the right-hand side of the screen, we have a button that has a down-pointing triangle on it. That's what we call the Minimize button. I'll point to that and click one time. And what that does is it takes File Manager and minimizes it to an icon down on the desktop. The important thing to remember here is that File Manager is still running. I've simply moved it aside for the moment while I go get something else or do something else. In fact, the way I work, I have File Manager minimized and running constantly. So when I need File Manager, I simply go down here to the desktop, point to that minimized File Manager icon, and double click to bring it back to its previous position. Next to the Minimize button, there's an up-down pointing triangle. That's what we call the Restore button. The Restore button, if I click on it, restores this to a window. Again, if you took Lesson 1, you know that when you have a window, you can move it and you can size it. I could size File Manager so that I could see File Manager in the foreground and Program Manager in the background. One of our more advanced topics, you can simply drag a file from File Manager into a group in Program Manager and instantly create an icon. But to do that, you need to be able to see both windows on screen at the same time. Since I don't want to do that right now, I'll simply maximize File Manager back to full screen. Notice that that Restore button changed. It became simply an up-pointing triangle. When it's in this position, it's called the Maximize button. I'll click on this, and it maximizes it to the full screen. Underneath File Manager's Restore button, there's a second Restore button. That's for the smaller window inside the big window File Manager. If I click on that Restore button, it restores the small window to a window, and later on I'll actually use that to create or open two windows so that I can look at two drives at the same time or two directories or folders at the same time. For right now, I'll maximize that smaller window again. Underneath the title bar, we have the menu bar. Oftentimes, we learn graphical products by looking through the menus and looking for commands that sound like they'll do what it is we want to do. So if I was trying to figure out how I might format a disk, I might go looking through the menus. I open the File menu, I read the commands inside, and I don't see anything that looks like it might help me format a disk. So I go to the Disk menu, and sure enough, I find a command for formatting disks. Since that's not what I want to do, I'll simply click on the Disk menu again and turn that menu off. Just to give you a quick overview of the menu bar, feel free to explore the menus, read the commands. You'll learn File Manager and any other application much more quickly this way. Underneath the menu bar, we have drive buttons. These drive buttons represent the drives or the disks inside this PC. I have one floppy drive, which we call A drive. I have a hard drive in my PC, which is called C drive, and there's also a D drive. This is a CD-ROM drive. I don't have the ability to store any of my information there, but I have access to tremendous amounts of information that I can purchase on CDs. Now, on the left-hand side of the screen, we have something called the directory tree. At the top of the directory tree, we have the root directory or root folder. It's the folder from which all other folders stem from. Right now, you're looking at my main level folders. I can view this directory tree many different ways. One of the things I might do is go to the tree menu, click on the tree menu to open it, and click on a command called Indicate Expandable Branches. This is a on-off command. Gives us a choice of having this option on or off. I'll click on it to turn it on. And notice what happened to the directory tree. Some of the folders now have plus signs on them. And what it means when you have a plus sign on a folder is that you have subfolders underneath that folder. If I want to see the subfolders, I simply point to a folder with a plus sign on it and double click. And it expands that folder out so I can see any subfolders inside. If I want to collapse that folder again, I simply point to the same folder, double click, and it rolls the subfolders back up inside. That plus sign is a choice. I personally prefer it. It just makes it easy to know which folders have subfolders underneath. We can also view the directory tree in other ways. I can go back to the tree menu and choose Expand All. And that expands the entire tree out so that I can see all folders, all subfolders of subfolders, and so on. The only reason I don't like to use it this way is your directory tree is alphabetized by default. So, if I want to look at my Windows folder right now, I need to use the scroll bar, click on the down pointing arrow, and I'm holding that down until I get down to the W's. And I finally find the Windows folder. And for me, that's just a lot of extra time spent looking for folders. So instead, I'll scroll back to the top of the directory tree, click on the root, go back to the tree menu, and choose Collapse Branch. And that rolls all of the folders up inside the root. That's also not a very helpful way for me to use my directory tree. So I'll go back to the tree menu and choose Expand One Level. And that shows me just the main level folders. A shortcut way to do that same thing, point to the root folder, double click, that collapses it, double click again, that expands it. Now on the left or the right hand side of the screen, we're viewing the contents of whatever folder is highlighted on the directory tree. So right now, if I click on the Windows folder to select it, over here on the right-hand side of the screen, I see all the multitudes of files inside of the Windows folder. The vast majority of these files were placed there when Windows was installed on my PC. In fact, you should be very careful not to save any of your files to this same folder. If you have, we'll soon learn how to move those files out of this folder. Now in this folder, the Windows folder, we have several different types of files, and they're represented by different icons. Throughout this discussion, we'll learn what these different icons represent. We can view the right-hand side of the screen several different ways, just like we could view the directory tree several different ways. If I go to the View menu, notice here at the top it's telling me I'm viewing the tree on the left-hand side of the screen and the contents of the directory on the right-hand side of the screen. I could view just the tree only, or I could click on the directory only command and view just the contents of that specific directory. It just gives me a little more screen space to see as many files at a time as possible. I'll go back to the View menu and choose Tree and Directory again. That's my preferred way to work with File Manager. Tree on the left, Directory Contents on the right. Now this bar that separates them, there's a scroll bar, but right next to it there's a little white bar that if I place my mouse over it, it becomes a double arrow. When I have that double arrow, I can hold down my mouse button and drag that arrow over so that I have more room on the right-hand side of the screen for files and a slimmer space on the left-hand side of the screen for the directory tree. Now we can also view different amounts of detail about these files on the right-hand side of the screen. Currently, we're just viewing the names of all these files. I can view all file details or partial details. Right now, I'll choose partial details. When I click on partial details, I get a dialog box that's asking me or giving me a choice of viewing the size of the files, date or time that the file was created or last modified, and any file attributes. Right now, I'd just like to see the size of all of these files. So I'll click on the little box next to size, and it puts an X in the box. We call this box a checkbox. Then I'll click OK. Now I can see the names of the files and the size of all the files inside. If I go back to the View menu, this time I'll choose All File Details. After choosing All File Details, I can now see the name of the file, the size of the file, the date and time it was created or last modified, and any file attributes. The A stands for archived, and H stands for hidden, S stands for system, and R stands for read-only. In a more advanced Windows lesson, you'll learn that you can assign some of these attributes yourself. For now, I'll go back to the View menu and choose Just Name. It allows me to see more of the files on screen at once. Also under the View menu, the default is to sort all of your files alphabetically by name. A default, by the way, is simply an automatic setting. We also have a choice of sorting by type. I'll click on Sort by Type. And what it does is it takes all my files and sorts them by the extension. In the DOS world, the way we're allowed to name files is with 8 characters, a period, and what we call a 3-character file extension. And that file extension actually tells us quite a bit about the file. It tells us what created the file. So when you see a file, for instance, that ends with BMP, that's what we call a bitmap file, and it's a type of graphics file. In fact, if you create anything in the accessory called Paintbrush, you would be creating a bitmap file. These happen to be wallpapers that ship with Windows, and we can see all of those lumped together. Now if I scroll over a little further, and I'm going to use the horizontal scroll bar to do that, I can see another important type of file. I see here files that end with EXE, and you might even recognize some of these. An EXE file is what we call an executable. An executable executes or launches a program. So if you notice here, you see cardfile.exe, that would launch the little program called cardfile. You also see calc.exe, that would launch the calculator. In Lesson 1, we learned how to create an icon and found out that in Program Manager, an icon is simply a pointer to the actual program file on the hard drive. Well, now we are looking at the actual program files. If I scroll over a little farther, there's a file here called sol.exe. That's the exact file we pointed an icon to when we created an icon in Program Manager. We created an icon to launch the Solitaire executable. Well, here in File Manager, we can use this file in a very similar way. Instead of having to create an icon out in Program Manager, I can simply point to this file and double-click. And that launches that particular executable. And obviously I could play a game of solitaire, and I'd love to just play all sorts of cards right now. In fact, I'll put the queen on the king and the king in the space, and go ahead and close solitaire. since we're not here to learn about solitaire today. All right, so we have all our executables together. Over time, you'll learn what more and more of these file extensions represent. Now I'd like to search for a file. A couple weeks ago, I created a file in Excel and don't remember precisely what I named it, and I don't remember where I saved it on my hard drive. So I'll use the search command here in File Manager to try to find that file. To start with, before I search, this is a helpful hint. Click on the root directory one time first to select it. In this way, search will start by searching at the root and then search all directories off of the root. Then I'll go to the File menu and click on the search command. And it brings up a dialog box. It's currently asking me search for, and when you have star or an asterisk, a period and an asterisk, it's telling you it will search for all files on your PC, which would be a lot of files. So if I want to limit this search, I know that Excel tags all my files with XLS. So I could put in asterisk period XLS, and that would look for any file that ended with the extension XLS. That still might produce a pretty good sized list. So I'll give it some more information. I happen to know I started the name with a T, but I don't know what else followed the T, and then it ends with XLS. So to do that, I'll simply type in T, I'll put an asterisk in again, standing for any other characters, period, XLS. Now underneath that it says it's going to start the search from C, or the root. And then there's a checkbox here that says it will search all subdirectories from the root on. Then I'll click OK. And it goes out and thinks for a second, that's a pretty fast PC, and gives me back a search results screen. The way I can tell it's an actual extra window or a search results screen is by looking at the title bar. It tells me search results, and it tells me even exactly what I searched for, T asterisk period XLS. Now, here in the results screen, it actually gives me path statements. We mentioned these earlier. A path is simply a map to an actual file. I now have a list of all files that end with XLS and start with T. And I can look through this list to help jog my memory on what I called that particular file. And it happens to be this file, ttours.xls. And it tells me it's on my hard drive, we knew that. It's in the Carol folder. Under that, it's in the Excel folder, and then the name of the file. So now I know where I can look for that file. To get out of this search results screen, I'll go up to the little control box. The lower control box is the one for this smaller window inside File Manager. So to close the search results screen, I'll point to that and double click. Now we're back to our normal screen. After searching for that file, I'll go to the Carol folder and double click to see any folders underneath. The Excel folder under that, double click, and sure enough, there's that tours file. Now, if I'd like to see what I had actually accomplished in that file, instead of closing out of File Manager or minimizing it, going to Program Manager, double-clicking on the Excel icon, waiting for Excel to launch, choosing the File Open command to open this file, I'll simply point to the file right here in File Manager and double-click. When I double-click, it automatically goes out, launches Excel, and opens this particular file inside of Excel. Saves me a few steps, and it's a lot faster. Now I see, by looking at this file in Excel, exactly what I had accomplished. I actually did enter all my information and created a chart. Later on, I'll come back and I'll actually format this chart. For now, I'm going to exit back out of Excel. To exit Excel, I'll point to Excel's control box and double-click to close Excel. Asks me if I want to save changes in this file, I'll say no. And we're back to File Manager. So you can see that it's very quick, or a definite shortcut to find your file here in File Manager. And if you're not sure what it is, you need to open it to check it for some reason, simply double-click on it here in File Manager. We can also print files from here as well. To print this file, I'd simply select the file here, go to the File menu, and choose Print. Again, it would go Launch Excel, open this file, and start the printing process. Would save me having to take all of those steps individually. Now I can also rename files right here inside a File Manager. This name is sort of strange. Instead of just tours, it's T-tours. I think it was just a typing error, so I'll fix that right here. I'll select the file, go to the File menu, and the command is rename. Click on rename, and it tells me first with a path where the file is located on the C drive, in the Carol folder, in the Excel folder under that, what the file is currently called, and now there's a cursor waiting for me here in the to line where I can type the name that I want to call it now. If I type in tours and hit enter now, it's going to change this file, and I'll show you what that means here in a minute. I'll click OK. Now notice that that tours file is now at the top of the list, and it has no extension. Notice that the piece of paper or the icon here in front of the tours file is now a blank piece of paper, no lines on it. Before it had lines on it, just like this commission file has lines on it. When a file doesn't have lines on it, it means it is not associated with any particular application. A simpler way of saying that is this file doesn't know what application it was created in. So if I try to double click it to open it, all I get back is an error. It says, File Manager cannot find the specified file. Make sure the path and file name, in this case the file name, is incorrect. So I'll say OK to this dialog box. And to fix this file, whenever I rename a file here in File Manager, I need to remember to put that extension on. So I'll go back and rename this by choosing File, Rename, and this time I'll call it tours.xls and click OK. Now my file is back to normal, has the lines on the piece of paper, has the XLS, and if I double click, it will launch Excel and open this file in it. So it's important to remember, in summing all of this up, the extensions that your particular applications assign to your files. In Lesson 3, we'll cover some of the common commands that are common to every application, every Windows application. When you save a file, there's a place in that dialog box that it tells you what extension it will put on your file. When we started this lesson on File Manager, I made a point of creating data directories or folders for you to save your data into. Treat this just like you would a file cabinet in your office. Create folders to store your data in a way that it makes sense for you and what you do. So in File Manager right now, I already have a folder called Carol. I share this PC with other people. Underneath that Carol folder, I have Excel, a general data folder, Lotus, Windows, WordPerfect 5.1, and WordPerfect 6.0. These are some of the products that I train on, and I have some files in there that I use for training purposes. Now I also have some customers that I do work with, and to make it easier for me to find files later, I'd like to create a special customers folder. So to create a directory, if I create a directory right now, while the Carol folder is highlighted, it will become a subdirectory of the Carol folder. Since that's not what I want, instead I'll start by clicking on the root directory so that whatever directory I create will be a main level folder. Now I go to the File menu and choose Create Directory. And it tells me in this dialog box that it will be located right off of the root directory and is waiting for me to give it a name. I'll call this one Customer, and I'll try to spell it right, and click OK. And now if I look at the directory tree, I can see a new customer folder right there. And there's currently nothing in it. It's just like taking a file folder out of a box, taking out a label, typing up a label, slapping the label on the file folder, and throwing it in the file cabinet. That's all we've done, but it's a little faster, isn't it? Now, I'd like a specific customer folder underneath the main customer folder. I have different customers that I do a lot of work for. So, I'll highlight the customer folder and choose File, Create Directory again. This time I'll call it Jones ENG for Jones Engineering. We're still constrained by that 8-character file limitation in naming anything here in the DOS world. Now I'll click OK. So now I have the customer folder, and inside of that I have a subfolder called Jones. And if I click on the Jones folder, I can see by the right-hand side of the screen there's nothing in it. Now I'd like to move a couple files that I've created that are specific to this customer. They're currently located in the Carol folder and the Excel subfolder under that. So I'll click on the Excel subfolder and I have a list of files here. This commission Excel file I actually want to move to the Jones folder. Now there's several ways we can move and copy files. One of them is to go to the File menu and choose the Move command or the Copy command, but that would be the long way to do it. I'll show you the shortest way. To move this file, all I do is point to the file, hold down my mouse button, and drag that file down to the Jones folder. Notice how I'm actually dragging a little piece of paper, and notice how it's actually going away from that highlighted area. So you can tell you're actually moving it away from one area, and now I'll drag it down, place it right on top of the Jones folder, and let go. And I get a dialog box, and it's really important to read these dialog boxes. It says, are you sure you want to move? So it tells you the action you're taking. The selected files or directories to, and it tells you the exact location that you're taking it to. In this case, C drive, customer folder, Jones folder under that. If that's correct, I simply click on the Yes button. Now if I go look in the Jones folder, I can see that that file is there. So I successfully moved it from one folder to another. Now maybe I actually want a copy in both folders. Someone else uses this other folder and they'd like to have a copy of the file there as well. To make a copy of that file, it's similar to going to the copy machine in your office. You'll end up with 2 individual copies that have no links to each other. But if I want to do that, I start the same way, but there's one minor difference. This time I'll hold down the Control key on my keyboard. While I hold down the Control key, I'll point to that file, hold down my mouse button, and drag that file. This time, the piece of paper is not going away from the highlighted area, and the file that I'm dragging has a plus sign on it, so you're getting lots of visual clues. So now I'll drag that back to that Excel folder, and it's important to let go of the mouse, then let go of the Control key. Otherwise, you're just back to a move if you let go of the Control key first. To make sure you did the right thing, read the dialog box. It says, are you sure you want to copy the selected files or directories, and tells you the location you're copying it back to. And I'll say yes. So I have a copy of the file in the Jones folder, and I have a copy of the same file up here in the Excel folder. These files are not connected in any way, so if I come in here a week from now and change this file, it does not change the other one. So if you put multiple copies of the same file on the same drive, be careful. It's probably a better idea to rename them and have different versions of the same file. Commish 2, Commish 1, something like that. So now that we know how to move files within the same drive from one folder to another, as well as how to copy files, it might be helpful to know how to move or copy files to a different drive. For instance, a disk drive where I can copy it to a diskette and take that diskette home to work on it. It's most helpful or advisable to work with more than one window at a time, to actually be able to see both drives at the same time. That way you can actually see where you're copying it from and where you're copying it to at the same time. So to do that, I'll start by going to the Window menu and choosing New Window. And it may not look like anything happened. There was just a very brief flash on the screen. But if you look at the title bar, there's now a :2, which is telling you actually have 2 windows open right now. Now I'll go back to the window menu and choose Tile. And that will actually tile both of these windows on top of each other. I can use that to compare 2 different folders. For instance, in this upper window, I'm looking at the Excel folder. In the lower window, I'll scroll down and look at the Jones folder. So I can see literally that commission file is in both folders. Now in this lower window, I actually would like to look at a different drive. To look at a different drive, this window is currently the active window. The way I can tell it's the active window is it's got the highlighted or the colored title bar. The other title bar right now is gray. So if I click on A drive, the A drive button, that lower window will go out and read A drive. But I got an error. It says there's no disk in drive A. I haven't put the diskette in. So I'll grab this disk here that I want to take home with me this evening and place it in the drive and push it all the way into the drive. Then with this error dialog box, I can simply click on the retry button. Now it'll go out and try to read drive A again, and this time it'll have a diskette in the drive. Common mistake to make. Now notice on my diskette even, I actually have folders created. I happen to carry a lot of information around with me as a trainer, and so I keep that in a personal data folder, Word data for some of my Word training files, WordPerfect data for some of my WordPerfect training files. Now I need to put an Excel folder on here because I'll be taking some Excel files back and forth. So to create a directory, I choose File, Create Directory, and I'll simply call it Excel Data. And click OK. And it's created a little Excel folder on the diskette. Now if I actually want to copy a file from C drive to A drive, all I have to do is drag that file. When you go across drives, Windows assumes that you want a copy on both drives. That's the default. So if I want this commission file, I'll point to it, hold down my mouse button, and simply drag it to the other drive, but not just drop it anywhere on the drive. I have the power to drop it into whatever folder on that drive I wanted. So I'll drag it on top of the Excel data folder and let go. And again, it confirms the action you're taking. Are you sure you want to copy to A drive Excel data? And I'll say yes. So when you go across drives, it assumes a copy, whereas when we dragged a file from one folder to another in the same drive, it assumed you wanted to move it from one folder to another. So what if I do want to move one of these files off of my hard drive onto the diskette, making some space on my hard drive today? All I have to do is point to that file and hold down either my Alt key or my Shift key. Either one works. So I'll hold down the Alt key, and this time I'll drag that file across to Excel data, let go of the mouse, then let go of the Alt key. And it says, are you sure you want to move it? So I'm literally taking it off of my hard drive to place it on this diskette. And I'll say yes. And that moves it across. Now what if I want to copy or move several files at the same time? To do that, you need to know how to select several files at the same time. If I want to select several files that are all right in a row, I can click on the first file, hold down my Shift key, and then go click on the last file in the list, and it gets everything from the first file to the last file. If instead I want a couple files that are not right next to each other, I'll click on the first file, hold down my Control key, and then click on each of the individual files I want to take with me. So now I've selected 4 individual files, and if I want to copy them to the diskette, I simply point to any of the highlighted areas, hold down my mouse button, and drag. As I'm dragging this time, notice that I'm actually dragging a little stack of papers. I'll drag those down to the Excel data folder and let go, and it confirms that I'm copying to the Excel data folder, and I'll say yes. And it copies all of those files to the diskette all at once, so that I can take this diskette home with me this evening and go work on any of those files that I need to. Now I copied some extra files into the Jones folder, and I've come to realize I don't need all of these files anymore, so I'd like to delete some of them. Deleting is one of those items that you need to be very, very careful with. We have the power to delete everything on our hard drive in one fell swoop here in File Manager. In the DOS world, we had to select and delete each file before we could ever delete a folder. But in the Windows world, we can delete a folder and everything in it in one step. So I'll start by showing you how to delete a file. The steps will be essentially the same if I want to delete a folder. If I want to delete this ABC Company file, I'll click on the file itself, go to the File menu, and choose Delete. Notice the shortcut key, I could also just hit the Delete key on my keyboard. And it brings up a dialog box. This is your first warning, you'll get two. It tells you where you're located, C drive, customer folder, Jones folder, and the actual name of the file you're about to delete. If that's correct, I'll go ahead and click OK. And here's the second confirmation. It gives you the entire path, drive, folder, subfolder, and the file name. If that's what I want to delete, I'll say yes. And that folder is gone or that file is gone in an instant. Now what if I wanted to delete several files at the same time? I'd simply need to highlight several files at the same time. To highlight several files in a row, I click on the first file, hold down my Shift key, click on the last file. If I really didn't want all of those files all in a row, I'll click on the first file, hold down my Control key, click on the next file. And that way I highlight several discontiguous files. If I want to delete them, same steps, File, Delete. What if I want to delete this entire folder? I can click on the folder, and it's very important here to notice that the folder is highlighted right now. It's green. These files are not highlighted even though they have light green lines around them. So pay attention when you're deleting. If I want to delete the folder, I'll go to the File menu and choose Delete again. This time, in this first dialog box, it actually puts the path here in the delete line. It says you're about to delete on C drive in the customer folder, the Jones folder. If that's what I want to do, I'll say OK. Then it confirms with me again. Now I have a choice between yes and yes to all. If I choose the yes button, it's like another safety net. It allows me to go through and confirm on each file inside that folder. If I choose yes to all, it will delete, it'll confirm on the very first file, and then it'll delete all the rest of the files in one swoop. If I really don't want to do this, I can say no. If I want to get out of the command altogether, I'll say cancel. I'll choose yes, and it'll stop on the first file. I'll say yes to that one. Stop on the next file, I'll say yes to that one, and then I realize this tonnage file I actually need. So I'll say no to that one, go on, say yes to the consult file, and now I get a dialog box that's telling me that it cannot remove the directory if there are any files left inside. So I'll go ahead and say OK, and this will give me an opportunity to move that file to a different folder. Then I can go delete this whole folder. When we're deleting, we get two warnings or two dialog boxes. And as we get more confident working with Windows, that's when we tend to quit reading those dialog boxes. Well, I can't recommend strongly enough, absolutely read them. Otherwise, you may make some errors that you'll really regret. I have the perfect example. Instead of reading those dialog boxes, I blew right through both of them. I said OK to the first one, yes to all on the second one. And what I had highlighted at the time was actually the root directory. And what I did was I deleted my entire hard drive. So be very careful with deleting and do read the messages. Now we've covered a lot of basics in File Manager. It takes most human beings 6 repetitions of any task to actually remember it. So try these things and review the tape. Some of the main things you'll want to know how to do in File Manager. You'll want to know how to create directories and begin storing your files in your data directories. If you've stored files in the program directories, that's fine. You now know how to move those files. You also need to know how to move or copy files to diskettes so that you can take them with you on the road, take them home with you to work on, or vice versa, back to work on. It's also important to know how to rename files and to understand all the parts of this screen and what it's telling you. And remember the little shortcuts about double-clicking on a file to launch that file and the application it was created in. Just a shortcut that some of us find more handy than going out to Program Manager and finding the application icon, double-clicking on the actual application icon, choosing File Open, saying OK, etc. It's just a little faster to do it here from File Manager.